Abigail, I need you to come by the clinic. Not for an appointment. Just come. And please, don't mention this to your son-in-law. That was the voicemail Dr. Hargrove left me on a Tuesday morning in February, 3 weeks after my husband's funeral. I stood in my kitchen holding the phone, still in my housecoat, looking out at the backyard where the snow had buried the garden beds I hadn't touched since September. Since before everything changed. I played the message twice. Doan had been Dr. Hargrove's patient for 11 years. They'd gone fishing together twice up near Kenora. He wasn't just our family doctor. He was someone Don trusted in a way he didn't trust many people. Don't mention this to your son-in-law. I put the phone face down on the counter and stood very still for a moment. My son-in-law's name is Curtis. He and my daughter Tara moved into the house with me 6 days after Don passed, the last week of January. Tara said it was because she was worried about me being alone. Curtis said the drive from their apartment in Mississauga was getting too long with the winter roads. I believed both of them at first. You want to believe your children. You raised them. You know who they are, or you think you do. Don and I had been married for 38 years. We'd built the house and Barry ourselves, not with our own hands, but with every decision we made together. The lot we chose, the extra insulation, the heated floors in the bathroom, because I told him my feet were always cold and he took that seriously. 38 years of a person choosing you, taking you seriously. When it stops, the silence is a different kind of cold. I'm 67 years old. I was a school librarian for 31 years in Simcoe County. I'm not a woman who falls apart easily, but grief does something to your sense of time. The first weeks after Don died, I moved through the house like I was waiting. I forgot to eat lunch 3 days in a row. I found myself standing in the doorway of his study for 20 minutes without knowing why I'd walked in. So when Tara suggested she and Curtis stay for a while, I said yes. I was grateful. I'm not ashamed to say that. It started slowly, the way these things always do. The first thing was the thermostat. Our house runs warm because of the heated floors, and I'd always kept it at 22 degrees. Curtis preferred it cooler, he said, 19 degrees. I woke up cold twice in the first week, padded downstairs, turned it back up, and didn't say anything. A small thing. A compromise. That's what family does. Then it was the schedule. Curtis worked from home. Something to do with logistics, I was never entirely clear on what, and he needed the kitchen table clear by 8 in the morning for his calls. Could I take my tea in the sitting room? Of course. Fine. I moved. Then Tara started talking about the house. It was a Sunday. We'd had the kind of dinner where no one says much and the television fills the silence. And afterward, Tara sat across from me at the table with her hands folded, the way she used to fold them in school when she was about to ask for something. Mom, she said, Curtis and I have been talking. The market in Barrie is really strong right now. We think you might want to consider, just consider, whether this house is the right size for you now. I looked at her. It's a lot of house for one person, Curtis said from the couch, not looking up from his phone. I'm not one person, I said. There are 3 of us in this house. Tara smiled the way you smile when you think someone is being naive. We won't be here forever, Mom, and with everything happening, the maintenance costs, the property taxes. Don always handled all of that, right? It might just be worth thinking about. I said I would think about it. I didn't sleep well that night. Over the following week, brochures appeared. I don't know how else to say it. They simply appeared, fanned out on the kitchen counter on the side table in the sitting room. Senior living communities, one in Collingwood, one in Aurora, active retirement, all-inclusive living, worry-free. The photographs showed women my age smiling at salad. I started to feel, and I know how this sounds, I started to feel like I was a guest in my own home, like decisions were being made on a schedule I hadn't been shown. Curtis began CCing himself on emails I sent to the accountant. He said he was just trying to help, that Don had always managed the finances and I might need support. Maybe he was right. I let it go. And then, one afternoon, I came home from a walk to find him at Don's desk in the study, the desk Don had built himself from maple he'd sourced from a salvage place outside of Orangeville, and Curtis had a folder of papers open in front of him, and he closed it when he heard me come in. Just getting organized, he said. I said nothing. I stood in the doorway and looked at that desk, and then I looked at him, and something in me went very quiet in a way that wasn't peace. That night I called my friend Ruth Ann. We've known each other since our children were in elementary school together. I told her about the brochures, about the thermostat, about the desk. I told her it all felt wrong, but I couldn't say exactly why, and she listened the way Ruth Ann always listens, which is to say completely and without offering excuses for anyone. "Abigail," she said, "when did you last check your own bank accounts?" I hadn't checked them since before Christmas, since before Dawn got sick in earnest. The next morning, I told Tara I needed to pick up a prescription at the drugstore. I drove instead to the branch on Dunlop Street and sat down with an advisor I'd never met before, a young woman named. She told me her name, but I was too nervous to retain it. And I asked her to print me a summary of recent activity. I sat there in that chair and read the pages 3 times. There had been 2 large e-transfers out of our joint savings account in December, before Dawn died, $4,200 each. The recipient was an account I didn't recognize. There was also an online bill payment made in January after Dawn died, to something called Briar Capital Holdings, $2,000. I had no idea what Briar Capital Holdings was. I drove to Dr. Hargrove's clinic from the bank. He'd cleared his lunch hour. His receptionist showed me straight to his office, not an exam room, and he came in and closed the door and didn't sit at his desk. He pulled a chair up and sat across from me like a person, not a doctor. "I wasn't sure whether to call you," he said. "Don made me promise I would. But he made me promise when he was very sick, and I just kept thinking about it." He set a letter on his knee. White envelope, sealed. My name on the front in Dawn's handwriting. Dawn had come to see Dr. Hargrove alone in November, the month before he died. Dawn knew he was dying. We both knew. The oncologist had been honest. But Dawn apparently knew something else too, something he hadn't told me, and he'd needed someone he trusted to hold on to a letter until the time was right. Dr. Hargrove said, "He told me to give it to you after the funeral. He said to make sure you were alone. He was very specific about that." He paused. He said, and I'm quoting him, "Don't let Curtis be in the room." I took the letter with both hands. I didn't open it in the office. I sat in my car in the clinic parking lot on a February afternoon with the heat running and the windows fogging, and I opened the envelope carefully, the way you open something you know you can't put back. Dawn's handwriting, neat and left-leaning the way it always was, the way it had been on grocery lists and birthday cards, and the note he'd tucked into my luggage the one time I'd flown to Halifax for a conference and he'd stayed home. "Abby, if you're reading this, I didn't get the chance to tell you everything I needed to tell you in time. I'm sorry for that. There are some things you need to know. In October, I noticed irregularities in our joint account. I didn't want to worry you while you were still hoping for a different outcome from the treatments. I did some checking. I spoke to a financial advisor at a different bank, not ours, someone I found on my own. I believe Curtis has been making unauthorized transfers. I couldn't prove it conclusively, not enough to say it definitively to your face, but I made a record of what I found and I gave copies to Dr. Hargrove and to my friend Ted at the old firm downtown. Ted knows what to do with them. I want you to go see Ted. His number is on the back of this page. Go alone. Don't tell Tara or Curtis beforehand. I love you. I have loved you for 38 years and I need you to be safe. Please go see Ted." I sat in that car for a long time. I want to try to explain what it felt like, if that's possible. It wasn't simple. It wasn't just relief or grief or anger. It was all of those things moving through me at the same time, like weather. My husband was gone. My husband was also, somehow, still here, still looking around corners for me, still thinking about my heated floors and my cold feet in the most terrible months of his life. I cried for a while. Then I stopped. Then I looked at the number on the back of the page. Ted Kowalczyk had worked with Dawn years ago before Dawn retired from civil engineering. He was older than us by a decade. I'd met him at retirement parties and once at a fall fair in Angus. He had the manner of someone who had spent a long time being careful with important things. I called him from the car. He answered on the second ring. He said, "Abigail, I've been expecting your call." He had the documents Dawn had given him. He had already, on his own initiative, spoken to a lawyer he knew who specialized in elder financial abuse cases. The transfers I'd found, the ones in December, traced back to an account that Curtis had opened under a numbered company. The January payment to Briar Capital Holdings was the same company, different name. Don had caught the pattern in October and documented it meticulously, the way he documented everything: spreadsheet, screenshots, bank statements, dates. There was more. Curtis had, sometime in November, accessed the online portal for Don's RRSP and attempted to add himself as a beneficiary. The change hadn't been finalized. Something in the verification process had flagged it, but the attempt was in the records. I drove back to the house on autopilot. Tara was out at a yoga class. Curtis was in the study at Don's desk. I walked past the doorway without stopping. I went to my bedroom and I sat on the edge of the bed and I looked at the reading lamp on Don's side that I hadn't been able to bring myself to move. I called Ruth Ann. I told her everything. "What do you want to do?" she asked. "I want my house back," I said. Ruth Ann came over that afternoon. We didn't say much to each other that needed saying. We've been friends for a long time, and sometimes that's how it is. She helped me box up a few things I wanted out of the study and carry them to my bedroom. She helped me locate the number for the non-emergency RCMP line and the Ontario Securities Commission complaint line that Ted's lawyer contact had mentioned. That evening, when Curtis came to find me in the kitchen, I was sitting at the table with my tea. I told him that I'd been thinking about the house, about what he and Tara had said. I told him I thought it was probably time for the two of them to go back to their apartment, that I needed some space to grieve and to get my bearings on my own. I kept my voice level. I kept my hands flat on the table. Curtis looked at me for a moment. Then he smiled, his particular smile, the one that meant he thought he was managing something. He said, "We've been thinking the same thing, actually. Just want to make sure you're settled first. Maybe we should all sit down and go through the financials together. I know it's a lot to sort out on your own." "Thank you," I said. "I have someone helping me with that." Something moved behind his eyes. Not much, just a flicker. "Who?" he asked. "A professional," I said. He left the room. I heard him on his phone 20 minutes later, speaking quietly on the back porch, and I didn't try to hear what he was saying. I didn't need to. 2 days later, while Tara and Curtis were both out, I had the locks changed. I called a locksmith I found in the phone book. Yes, I still use the phone book. Don always said that made me eccentric, and I consider it a tribute to him. And by 3 in the afternoon, there were new locks on every exterior door and a chain on the inside of the back. The locksmith was a young man who didn't ask questions and did good work, and I tipped him $20. I left a key in an envelope on the porch with Tara's name on it, and a note that said, "Your things are in the guest room. I've changed the locks for security reasons. Please come by when you're ready to talk. I love you." What happened in the weeks after that is both simpler and harder to explain than you might think. The RCMP Financial Crimes Unit contacted me within a week of my report. Ted's lawyer, a woman named Patricia Bellamy, who worked out of an office on Collier Street and had done this kind of work for years, helped me through the process of formally documenting everything: the unauthorized transfers, the beneficiary change attempt, the pattern that Don had first noticed in October. It all constituted fraud. Curtis was charged under the criminal code. The proceedings moved with the kind of slowness that legal proceedings always move, and I won't pretend it was easy to watch my daughter go through that, because it wasn't. Tara came to me twice in those first weeks. The first time, she was angry in the way you're angry when you're also scared, and we said things that weren't kind, and I won't repeat them here. The second time, she came alone, without Curtis, and she sat in my kitchen and looked at her hands and said, "I think I knew something was wrong. I think I knew for a long time." That was enough for the moment, not everything, but a beginning. I don't know what the outcome of the charges will be by the time anyone reads or listens to this. Some things take their own time. What I know is that I'm still in my house. The garden beds are uncovered now. It's nearly April. The snow has mostly gone, and last week I turned the soil in the bed along the south fence and found the bulbs I planted in October still intact under there, still waiting. Don chose those bulbs: tulips, an allium, and 2 kinds of daffodil. He ordered them from a catalog and read me the names of the varieties over breakfast one morning like he was reading poetry. He was a careful man, a quiet man who paid attention to things. He paid attention to me for 38 years, and even in the worst weeks of his life when he was sick and frightened, and being very brave about it, He was paying attention. He saw what was happening. He made a plan. He trusted the right people. I think about that letter every day. The handwriting, the way he started it with Abby, he only ever called me that in private, never in company, that was ours alone. The way he ended it with, I have loved you for 38 years, and I need you to be safe. I got a small apartment's worth of tulips. And I got the truth. And I got my house. Some days that feels like enough. Some days I walk into the study and stand at his desk for a moment, just to be near the maple grain, the salvage wood from outside of Orangeville that he was so pleased about, and I put my hand flat on the surface of it and I think, I'm all right. I'm all right. I know you knew I would be. I've had a lot of time to sit with everything that happened. The quiet that comes after that kind of upheaval is its own strange thing. Not peaceful exactly, but real. And I find myself thinking about causes and effects, not in any grand way, just the plain, ordinary truth that what people do catches up with them eventually, and what we choose to do, or not do, shapes what finds us in return. Curtis made choices. He made them carefully, over months, in small increments, the way you do when you're counting on someone being too overwhelmed to notice. He counted on my grief making me slow. He counted on my age making me naive. He counted on the fact that a woman who had spent 38 years letting her husband manage the accounts wouldn't suddenly start asking questions. He was wrong on every count. But more than that, he was wrong to think that what Dawn had built over a lifetime could be quietly dismantled while I was looking the other way. Dawn had been paying attention long before I was. That was the thing Curtis never accounted for. He was so focused on what he thought I didn't know that he never stopped to consider what Dawn already did. I think about Tara too, and I try to do it honestly rather than with the softness that comes from wanting things to be simpler than they are. She knew, she told me. Not everything, but enough. There's a particular kind of thing that happens when we know something is wrong and we choose not to look directly at it. I've done it myself. Most people have. And I don't say this to condemn her, but there are consequences to that kind of not looking, and she's living in those consequences now, and I think somewhere in her she understands why. What I keep coming back to is this. Integrity is not a dramatic thing. Don never made a speech about it. He just kept showing up, kept paying attention, kept doing the small, careful work of protecting the people he loved, even when he was sick, even when he was frightened, even when he had 100 other things demanding his attention. He wrote that letter at a time when most people would have been entirely consumed by their own fear, and he wrote it clearly and practically and with full knowledge that he might never know whether it reached me in time. That's not heroism in any movie sense. That's just who he was, consistently, for 38 years. And that consistency, that quiet, daily practice of doing what was right, was what saved me in the end. Ruthann once told me that she thought intelligence without honesty was just cleverness, and cleverness without conscience was just a tool for harm. Curtis was clever. He had a plan, and he worked it methodically. But he wasn't honest, and that gap between what he could figure out and what he was willing to be accountable for, that gap is where everything fell apart for him. For me, the thing I carry forward is simpler than any of that. It's about not waiting to pay attention. Not assuming that because things have always been handled by someone else, they'll continue to be handled. Not confusing trust in a person with the absence of your own judgment. Don trusted me to be capable of handling the truth, and he was right. I just needed to be handed the chance. I think a lot of women my age were raised to believe that stepping back was a form of respect or love, and sometimes it is. But there's a version of it that leaves you exposed in ways you don't see coming until it's almost too late. The tulips came up in May, 3 full rows along the south fence, exactly the varieties Don had read to me from that catalog over breakfast. I stood at the kitchen window with my tea and looked at them for a long time. He knew I would be all right. He trusted that. I think the least I can do is trust it too.